Welcome to PSY 503, History of Psychological Testing, Study Session 6. Introduction. This lecture presents the historical background to the development and use of psychological tests. It covers the contributory works of psychologists both locally and in the Western countries. Objectives. This lecture is expected to expose students to the history behind the development of psychological tests, bearing in mind the contributions of various persons towards achieving this. The following are targeted. 1. Students should gain knowledge on the development of foreign psychological tests. 2. Students should gain knowledge on the development of local psychological tests. 3. Students should be able to mention names of historical fathers in test development. Content. Testing is centered on the fact that differences exist in people's abilities, personality, and behavior, which can be measured. While literature has it that Plato and Aristotle wrote about individual differences, historians have obtained evidence that they were preempted by the mandarins of ancient China. The ancient Chinese had a relatively standard civil service testing program more than 4,000 years ago. At 2200 BC, a civil service system was instituted by the Chinese emperor to determine how fit its officials were at performing duties. By the time of the Han Dynasty, 206 BC to AD 220, the use of test batteries, 2 or more tests combined, became prominent. These tests covered such topics as civil law, military affairs, agriculture, revenue, and geography. By the time of the Ming Dynasty, AD 1368 to AD 1644, tests had become well developed. During this period, there was a national multi-stage testing program that involved local and regional testing centers equipped with special testing booths. Those who did well on the test at the local level moved to the provincial capital for more extensive X-ray examinations. After this second testing stage, those with the best results moved on for a final round of examinations at the nation's capital. Only those who passed this third set of tests were eligible for public office. The Western world learned about testing programs through exposure to the Chinese. The British and French officials, for instance, patterned their civil service examination procedures after the ancient Chinese system. The impetus of the scientific study of individual differences actually grew rapidly in the 19th century. In the early part of the 19th century, scientists generally disregarded individual differences in sensorimotor and mental abilities. Prior to the development of automatic equipment for measuring and recording physical events, human observers were trained to make such measurements by observations. Contributions to psychological test construction. Charles Darwin. A direction towards the understanding of individual differences came with the publication of a book by Charles Darwin called The Origin of Species in 1859. Darwin proposed a theory which explains that higher forms of life evolved on this earth partially because of individual differences among individual forms of life within a species. By this occurrence, some possess characteristics that are more adaptive or successful in a given environment. By implication, those with the most or best adaptive characteristics survive at the expense of those with poor or weak adaptive characteristics. Thus, the former become fit for the environment while the latter become less fit for survival. The survivors then pass their characteristics on to the next generation. Darwin argued that through this process, life has evolved to its presently complex and incredible intelligence levels. Sir Francis Galton. Galton was born in Birmingham, England, into a wealthy family. At age 16, he became a house pupil at Birmingham General Hospital. Galton attended King's College, London, and Trinity College, Cambridge, where he studied medicine and mathematics respectively. He later became a geographer and an anthropologist. From the evolutionary theory of Charles Darwin, his cousin, Galton developed an interest in individual differences. His book Inquiries into Human Faculties, published in 1883, established him as the pioneer of scientific psychology in England. In his book, Hereditary Genius, Galton observed that some distinguished judges often became distinguished themselves and concluded that eminence ran in families. He believed that intelligence was inherited and adapted Darwin's concept of selective adaptation to this proof. Galton himself devised most of the simple tests administered at his anthropometric laboratory, many of which are still familiar either in their original or in modified forms. Examples include A. The Galton whistle or measure high tone hearing. B. The simple photometer to test how accurately people can match two spots of color. C. Calibrated pendulum to measure people's reaction time to sound and light. D. A bar with variable distance scale to test people's ability to estimate visual extensions. E. A series of weights to measure kinesthetic sensitivity by having people rearrange them in order from highest to heaviest. F. A rotating disc to test the capacity for estimating perpendicular movement. G. Bottles containing material with the same odor but of different intensity used to test smell by having people arrange them in order. Galton believes that tests of sensory discrimination could serve as a means of gauging a person's intellect. In this respect, it was partly influenced by the theories of Locke. Thus, Galton wrote, "The only information that reaches us concerning outward events appears to pass through the avenue of our senses, and the more perceptive the senses are of differences, the larger is the field upon which our judgment and intelligence can act." Galton, 1883, page 27. Galton had also noted that idiots tend to be defective in the ability to discriminate heat, cold, and pain, an observation that further strengthened his conviction that sensory discriminative capacity would on the whole be highest among the intellectual are blessed. Galton, 1883, page 29. In conclusion, we can say that Galton invented psychological testing and started objective personality testing. He was highly committed to test standardization and funded many others like Cattell and Pearson into scientific measurement. Generally, Galton set the stage for the development of a methodology for demonstrating differences in ability. Thus, while Wilhelm Wundt preserved the past, Sir Francis Galton built a foundation for the future. Carl Pearson. Pearson was a mathematician and an engineer who got interested in Galton's natural inheritance. He later turned from engineering to analysis of inheritance of traits. Working with Aidan Galton, therefore, he developed the regression equation. By using Galton's discovery of correlation, otherwise referred to as Pearson product moment correlation coefficient, the formula is given as. This statistic is now used to test hypotheses, establish reliability and validity, and a very important tool in the entire field of applied mathematics. Other statistical outgrowths from the person R, as it is usually called, are the concept of covariation, prediction equation, and factor analysis. The factor analytic theorists. The factor analytic investigators include 1. Charles Spearman. Spearman contributed to psychological testing with his theory of human intelligence that he tested over several decades. Spearman discovered that there was a positive correlation between scores on many different measurements and originated sophisticated method of data analysis known as factor analysis. Factor analysis shows how different measures are related. He said the logic of factor analysis is analogous to the mathematical procedure of factoring. 2. Edward Lee Thorndike. In the factor analytic proposition, Thorndike 1921 saw intelligence as made up of a multitude of separate elements, each representing a distinct ability. He proposed that mental activities have common elements which combine to form clusters. 3 elements identified include A. Social intelligence, dealing with people. B. Concrete intelligence, ability to understand and manipulate physical objects. C. Abstract intelligence, dealing with mathematics and symbols. However, factor analysis was not carried out to obtain these clusters. Thorndike was influenced by Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Darwin earlier proposed that mental ability was not uniquely human, but only more developed in humans than in other species. If humans evolved from lower animals, it follows that the study of animal learning was essential to understanding the biological origins of human intelligence. Thorndike's contribution to psychological testing is the puzzle box he devised for his research on trial and error learning in animals. This type of learning is now known as instrumental conditioning. He also developed paper and pencil tests and contributed immensely to the development of efficient, scientifically based schooling in America, where he hails from. His research showed that learning any one skill has little effect upon the rate or ease of learning another, even for quite similar tasks. 3. Llewellyn Thurston. Thurston 1887 to 1995 was born in Chicago. He was an American psychometrician and psychologist who was primarily concerned with the problem of measurement. Thurston contributed much towards the establishment of valid principles of measurement in areas like mental abilities, intelligence, attitude, social judgment, psychophysics, and personality. Working in the area of mental abilities, Thurston posited 2 different definitions of mental age. First, from the chronological age, for which a specified test performance is averaged. Second, from the average chronological age of a person's performance at a specified level. However, Thurston observed the shortcomings associated with both definitions and advanced the application of either percentile ranks or standard scores in representing test performance of children as well as of adults. A summary of the works by Thurston 1924 to 1955 are presented thus. 1924. The nature of intelligence. 1925. A method of scaling psychological and educational tests and the fundamental of statistics. 1926. The mental age concept. 1927. The unit of measurement in educational skill. 1928. The absolute zero in intelligence measurement. 1929. The measurement of attitude. 1930. A neurotic inventory. 1931. the reliability and validity test, and multiple factor study of vocational interest and multiple factor analysis. 1934. The vectors of mind. 1935. The vectors of mind and multiple factor analysis for the isolation of primary traits. 1947. Multiple factor analysis, a development and expansion of the vector of mind. 1948. Psychological implication of factor analysis. 1951. The dimension of temperament. 1954. The analytical method of simple structure. 1955. A method of factoring without commonalities and the measurement of values. 4. Vernon. He developed a theory of intelligence which considered factors of intelligence in hierarchical forms. The highest in the hierarchy is the general intellective factor, G, followed by two factors, verbal education, VED, and practical mechanical spatial, PM. Each of these is further broken down into minor group factors. The theory thus synthesizes the works of Spearman and Dawson, but gives more importance to G. 5. Cattell. Cattell was active both in the establishment of laboratory for experimental psychology and in psychological testing. His interest in measurement of individual differences was reinforced by his contact with Galton. In his article of 1890, he used the term mental test for the first time in psychological literature. 6. Guilford. Guilford was an American, prominent in multi-factor theory. He developed a model which expresses intellectual factors into a system. The model, named as the structure of intellectual model, states that intellectual tasks could be understood by the kind of mental operation performed, the type of content on which mental operation is performed, and the resulting product. 3 dimensions were thus delineated. 7. Binet, 1857 to 1911. Binet has been referred to as the father of intelligence testing for his development of valuable tools for the assessment of intelligence. His interest was first in law, then in biology, and finally in psychology, with particular concern for the clinical, developmental, and experimental areas. Alfred Binet, a French psychologist, is credited for developing the first measure of intelligence. In the 1890s, the Paris Ministry of Education was concerned with separating the weak students from the strong, so as to provide extensive less academic kinds of schooling for the less intelligent children. 8. Wechsler. Wechsler's contribution to psychological testing was basically in intelligence testing, with the shortcomings in the use of Binet-Simon scale in terms of its H-scale formula. Yet, and others published their point scale formula in 1915. They believed that the H-scale formula would organize and systematize a series of subtests into a standardized scale. Wechsler developed his first intelligence scale and named it Wechsler-Bell Intelligence Scale Form 1 and 2. Tests constructed in Nigeria. 1. Student Problem Inventory (SPI). The SPI was developed by Bakari, 1977. It is a self-report inventory through which the individual student describes his personal problems according to his awareness of them and according to the extent to which he is willing to disclose them. The SPI, with a final set of 120 items, surveys the following problem areas which are labeled as sections in the inventory. These problem areas are as follows. Section A, Physician Health Problems. Section B, Financial Problems. Section C, Social Relationships Problems. Section D. Sexual problems. Section E. Social psychological problems. Section G. Moral and religious problems. Section H. Family problems. Section I. Problems about the future. Section J. Academic and study problems. 2. Awari-Tefe Psychological Index (API). The API was developed by Alfred Awari-Tefe in 1982. The instrument is of clinical importance as a measure of general psychopathology. It is based on a 3-point scale of yes and no and question mark, implying that the respondent is undecided. In its initial form, the API consists of 117 items, either in single words or simple short phrases, thus making it easy to translate into local languages. The 117 items were impressionistically arranged into subgroups. These are sleep, intellect, perception, heat, sensation of movement, mood, speech, motor behavior, activity, alimentary tract, and general somatic. 3. Enugu Somatization Scale (ESS). The Enugu Somatization Scale was developed by P.O. Ebigbo, 1981. The scale was developed in an attempt to overcome the difficulty encountered in using Western diagnostic illness categories and scales for assessing mental and psychological illness in Nigeria. In its original form, the test consists of 65 items arranged into 2 subgroups: head 23 items and body 42 items, with yes and no response alternatives. The Enugu Somatization Scale is used for the determination of the level of severity of general psychopathology, the rate of incidence of psychiatric morbidity, and the effect of therapeutic intervention. 4. Study Habit Inventory (SHI). The SHI was developed by Bakare in the year 1977. It is a self-report inventory which enables the individual student to describe the situation, habit, and condition which affect its use of study time and its subsequent performance on tests and examinations. The inventory consists of 45 items in form of direction, questions, to which the student is required to provide answers on a 5-point scale of how frequently he or she behaves in that way. The questions on the study habit inventory are grouped into 8 sections. They are as follows. Section A. Homework assessment. Section B. Time allocation. Section C. Reading and note-taking. Section D. Studying period procedure. Section E. Concentration. Section G. Examinations. Section H. Teacher consultation. The SHI is designed for use with students of secondary school age or students in teacher training colleges. In spite of the initial or intended use of the test, it can also be used as a survey or screening instrument, as a diagnostic instrument, as a teaching aid, and as a research tool. 5. Vocational Interest Inventory (VII). The Vocational Interest Inventory was developed by Bakare in 1977. The published form of the VII is a 12-page booklet having some relevant personal information about the subject as well as the direction for completing the inventory on the front cover. On the back cover, there is a space for collating the subject score in each interest area as well as for making an interest profile from these scores. The middle 10 pages consist of 10 items on each page, that is, 100 in all. Each of the 10 items on any one page belongs to one of the 10 interest areas. 6. Adolescent Personal Data Inventory (APDI). The APDI was developed by Professor Julius O. Akinboye. It consists of 265 items, subgrouped into 10 sections. Section A. Measures self-concept of adolescence. Section B. Measures general study behavior of adolescents. Section C. Measures behavioral health attributes of adolescents. Section D. Measures psychopathology of adolescents. Section E. Measures vocational aspiration of adolescents. Section G. Measures ethical standards of adolescents. 7. School Readiness Survey (SRS). The School Readiness Survey was developed by Jordan and Massey in 1967 and re-standardized in 1975. But like most other psychological tests, it was based on American subjects and was therefore not suitable for use in Nigeria. This made Awarichefe and Ebe to devise Nigerian norms for the test. Their version of the test was published in 1982. The instruments used consist of 7 self-explanatory sections. They are as follows: number concepts, discrimination of forms, color naming, symbol. 8. Transcript Experiential Index (CCEI). The Middlesex Hospital Questionnaire (MSHO), also known as the Transcript Experimental Index (CCEI), was developed by Cronbert Cripps in 1966. The test evolved as a short clinical diagnostic self-rating instrument for easy and faster quantification of psychoneurotic traits and symptomatology in a formal interview. In the light of the sociocultural differences between Nigeria and Anglo-American conditions in which this test was developed, Dr. U.H. Iezue, a consultant psychiatrist, and Mr. N. Kumaraswamy, a clinical psychologist, decided to standardize and validate the instrument for use in Nigeria. 9. Motivation for Occupational Preference Scale (MOPS). MOPS were developed by Thackeray in 1977. It is a self-rating scale consisting of 3 major sections. The first section requires the subject to complete some personal information, while the second section requires him to identify his 2 most preferred occupations. The third section of the scale is designed to identify the reasons for occupational preference and the hierarchy among these reasons. 10. AMA's Questionnaire Measure of Achievement Motivation (NACH). AMA's 1970 Questionnaire Measure of Achievement Motivation was adopted for the Nigerian cultural context by J.E. Eyo. The adopted version was published in 1986. Unlike the original questionnaire, which has an average of 5 multiple choice of response per item, the adopted version has only 3 per item. The author, however, ensured that it preserved AMA's original meaning of items. Thus, the 9 components of NACH in the original text were also written in the adopted version. 11. Yoruba version of the MMP 1-2. Bana, 1998. Developed standardized scores and the conversion T-scale tables for the MMP 1-2 content and validity scales for diagnosis of mental health of the Yoruba population of Ibadan. She used a total of 18 scales of 430 items for the standardization. The MMP 1-2 has a total of 41 scales and 31 subscales developed through more than 50 years of scientific research, making a total of 567 items that measure 72 total skills. 12. General Self-Esteem Scale. The scale was developed by Adanijo and Oyefeso 1986 and subsequently used by Oyefeso 1990 in his doctoral dissertation. The scale is a 15-item self-report questionnaire. It has Likert type response format of 5 points. Low scores in the scale imply low self-esteem. This scale measures a global evaluation of the self and indicates the extent to which the individual believes self to be capable, significant, successful, and worthy. It presents various evaluative statements about the self which the person is expected to endorse in terms of degree of application. 13. Task-Specific Self-Esteem Scale. This scale was developed by Ehigi 1993 and used in his doctoral dissertation. The scale is a modified version of the Adanijo and Oyefeso 1986 self-esteem scale. The items were therefore restructured to reflect a particular task to be performed. Thus, test recipients are made to rate themselves in relation to the task at hand. The scoring method is the same as that of Adanijo-Oyefeso scale. The author found significant correlation between the two scales. End of study session 6. Thanks for listening.